All right. This is really, really fun because Fantasia is still going on, and I ended up seeing a film. And every time Fantasia starts, you go through the list and you're like, all right, what are we going to see first? And especially the last couple of years, Fantasia has been online, so the pick of what you want to watch isn't necessarily the limits aren't for when something's screening. You can start watching stuff that's streaming on the platform right away. And the first movie that I picked that just kind of grabbed my attention was Baby Money. I immediately spoke to Ryan and I said, Ryan, you got to watch Baby Money. And I'm
And
really,
I
really
did.
happy to have, and you did. And I'm really, really happy to have the director and writer of Baby Money, Mikhael Bassilli. Did I do good?
You did fantastic.
Thank you.
On a second try, that's unparalleled.
So, Mike, tell me this I think what's refreshing about this was that when you're watching, when you're at a festival like Fantasia's, it's a genre film festival, and this was, I mean, this definitely would fall into a genre, but I could see this playing anywhere, and I could see any audience coming into this movie and enjoying this. Was that kind of a goal of yours?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, in development, just to give you a little bit of backstory about to that question, some context, getting into development on this script was really out of necessity because I wanted to create something with a broader audience scope, because I had my last couple projects, which were great. I mean, I spent months, years developing some stuff, got some amazing talent involved in it, but I just couldn't get it financed, right? I couldn't get stuff made. So I made this pivot in this mind frame, which was I was just say like strategically focused as a filmmaker. I'm like, I got to make something that is going to capture as many audience members as possible, because the mission here is like, do something that's going to be like the buzzword financially viable, or like commercially viable. So I was like, okay, I have a limited scope of budget. I have to make something that's going to reach as many people as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to craft something for that within the scope of what we had. And so Baby Money was the result of that. So yeah, absolutely. We wanted to make, the intention 100% was to make something that really as many people are going to gravitate to, as many eyeballs are going to see it. And it's going to really stay in its lane, as a thriller, suspense, drama, and capture those audiences and capture that attention using some very really simplistic, plot devices and that are really within the genre tradition, to make that happen. And so, yeah, that was very intentional.
When you watched Baby Money, did it remind you of anything? Were there certain feelings that came up?
It kind of reminded me of the claustrophobic intensity of like something like Reservoir Dogs, where everyone's in over their head and they're injured, and the outside world is coming in and they need to fight it off somehow or escape. And what I loved about this movie is that every character matters. There is no disposable person in this movie. Everyone and their actions reflect on what needed to happen. There's not a this happened and then this happened. No, this happened because this happened. And I love movies like that because it shows that attention to detail that someone can put, that much love and care into something. A viewer respects that, especially at a festival like this when you see so many movies. When you see one of those movies in the beginning, you're like, I am so in. I am so glad that this is the first movie I saw this year. Set that high bar.
Love it. That's like I love hearing that kind of stuff, because that's that's really the doctrine of storytelling that I subscribe to. I love I love the payoffs. I love the constant sequence of I call it like motivated action. Things are happening and begetting more action, and capturing an audience's attention. That was a very purposeful approach. And so yeah, and I studied a couple movies, and one of them was Reservoir Dogs, because what you kind of alluded to was this idea of like everybody has to have a specific role, and when you have such a contained movie where you have to keep people in one position for as long as you possibly can, because you don't want to branch out too much, because that's what the filmmaking parameters allow you to do. You have to develop characters, and you have to give them an arc, and you have to give them some real life, and you have to be able to pay that off. So the distribution of character attributes was something that took time, and what was a really a major focal point.
And there's some major surprises. Just when you think you know exactly what's going down, that's not what's going down at all.
Yeah, that was, you know what, that's interesting because we had drafts. So like a little backstory, I had a big letdown. Like I had a movie, I had a big star attached to it. It all fell through. I was depressed. I was like on my kitchen counter. I was telling my girl, I have tears in my eyes. I'm like, I can't do it anymore. This is it. I had like a newborn baby, by the way. I'm like, this is never going to happen for me. And she's like, you just got to try one more time. And that's when I pivoted into something like Baby Money. And I came up with the idea, on a Saturday, like literally a Friday, I'm on that kitchen counter. Or Saturday, I come up with the idea. I do the outline Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I write the first draft on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and the you know, things were pretty solid. I think we changed a lot of those. You know, I realized that to make this at least as novel as we can, to your point, we had to throw in some things that would happen that would like have some shock value at some points, and so. And so I'm glad it paid off. You know, for a lot of people don't see it coming. So
yeah. And there's, and like Ryan was saying, you know, every character matters in this movie. There's nobody that's really disposable. And every action, you know, leads to, you know, every action leads to reaction, and everything is set up in a way that, you know, this has to happen for this to happen. But you're always keeping the audience on their toes. And I think as an avid film viewer, I appreciate that, because sometimes people can get a little lazy, and there's nothing lazy in this movie at all.
Thank you. I really appreciate that acknowledgement, because it was tough to, the development of the script was tough to pull that off. I'm a big believer in just lean. Everything is just, you know, there is no there's nothing to trim off of this.
No, and this movie shredded.
Shredded, lean, ripped, and so like, you know, that was, I really appreciate that the audience, and I know that an audience, we did a lot of case studies. So maybe you don't know this, but I run a company called Scriptmatics. It's scriptmatix.com, and what we do is we aggregate a lot of data and analytics on script development. So we have some really interesting technology that we work on. And so we did some case studies, and we have a lot of interesting case studies on stuff within the genre tradition that we gathered. And I think one of those things that we knew that we have to pull off if we want to actually create a commercially viable a thriller, suspense drama on a limited budget is we have to do exactly what you said. And I really, really do appreciate the acknowledgement, and it really speaks to, I guess, your acumen also as a film critic.
I'm not a critic, fan. I never criticize someone that puts thousands of hours into something. I always go into every situation wanting to be a fan, and I think Ryan agrees with that. I want to be a fan.
Yeah, I mean, you always want it. Like, yeah, you don't. There's this whole thing about fandom sometimes where they walk into something and they're just waiting to not be impressed by something. We're the absolute opposite. Yeah. We want to love everything despite itself sometimes. I noticed something about the opening credits. Like, the opening credits is super stylized, kind of sexy, and really sets a mood. What would you say? And it's right after a scene where this movie is about a heist gone wrong, you can say, and involving a woman who finds out that she's pregnant. And so you have this super sensitive, serious scene, and then it goes into this opening credits. Can you tell me about the inspiration behind the credits and the music to it? Because it had a very distinct vibe to it.
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I knew that we wanted to, in the development, I was like, okay, we have to throw the audience into the story as fast as possible. So we had written out, or I had written out with MJ more of a setup. And I was like, okay, this is going to drag this story too long. And because I had this thing, I'm like, I'm going to get the audience hooked if they can just get past that first like 7 minutes, right? Where things go wrong. I want to get there as fast as possible. So the first idea was like, okay, let's do that through an opening credit animation sequence. Second was, I felt like there was the way that we wanted to shoot this in the style that we wanted to go for. It felt like it's one night, it's a slice of life, but it felt almost like these are like some kind of like a comic. I just, for some reason, I had this feeling like I'm like in a comic book. For some reason, I just had this feeling. I'm like, it's just a short little story and things go wild. And it just felt like, you know what, this vision in my mind just came up. And I remember, because I went off and I ended up producing that entire animation sequence, and I was like really closed doors about it. I was like, nobody can really look at it. Let me take care of it. And I had that vision. I had that black and white, really edgy, gritty feel to it, because I felt like that was, it was part of the hook. It was part of, for me, that feeling. It's really intuitive. I don't know how else to describe it other than, you know, this is my intuition telling me like, this is what I want to see. And I want to take us through this journey. And I want to show something very valuable that ties the narrative together, that bridges that gap between, this is a woman who just found out that she's going to have a baby and she can't afford it, to now they're in a car and they're waiting in a parking lot to meet up with some people to go do some kind of a heist. And how do I incorporate a style and a feel to that engages an audience and brings them in and lets them know that we're going for a fun ride? Because it was very easy to go from that opening scene and be like, okay, we're entering a drama. But I wanted people to feel like, okay, we're going on a ride right now. And let's get on that ride, and let's make sure that they know that this ride is going to be fun. It's going to be edgy and it's going to be exciting. So that was really, hope that answers the question.
Absolutely.
And it's funny because both Ryan and I are big fans of National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. I know you're probably going to say, why are you bringing this up? But the animation scene at the beginning of Christmas Vacation is also something that's a lot of fun, that kind of pulls you in. So I like the fact that you did that. I agree with Ryan. It just, it sets a different mood. And it does have, it's cool. I mean, and I think a lot of people would probably go, it's going to take too much time. Don't bother. You know,
no, it was absolutely, it was a necessity. I just think that there was that internal debate, and they're like, you know, like, are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to expend your resources and time to go ahead and do this? Because it took a while. It took about, you know, I think 2.5 months to produce that, and it could have been a hit or miss, but I was like, we have to. I think more for, I don't know how much people are paying attention to the actual story, the little micro story inside of that animation, but it is very important to understand. Like, we had a set of things like, they're in love, they're out of luck, they don't have enough rent money, they have to, and now we've bridged that gap, and those are important story details that needed to be put through. And
you know, the relationship between Gil and Minnie. It's funny because there's so many, you know, being someone who's known a lot of people over my life, and who's been in relationships and known a lot of people in all kinds of relationships. There's a lot of manipulation that's going on here. From Gil, he's a master manipulator. You can tell. And it's kind of fun to see Minnie go through these stages of, you know, okay, I want to stand by, I want to be, and then at one point where she just doesn't care anymore.
Yeah, you know, that was part of, obviously, like, the drama. Like, you know, it's funny, people say, I love the reviews and I love the critics, whether they're really, and they've been resoundingly good, but there are some that are critical, and it's like, you know, this is in a lot of ways a drama. I had to create those interpersonal dynamics, right, between characters, and there's a whole backstory, and there's a whole lot of stuff that didn't necessarily make the page, but we had to create some really interesting dynamics. When you're keeping characters together, they have to have histories, they have to have dramas, they have to have things that precede the narrative events that matter in order to give them life. And I think that I won't give it away because we did have a lot of relationship anecdotes that were discussed, and especially with the actors too. It was great working with the actors on that, but understanding their dynamics. And you had to have that. I think that you have to do your best to be able to keep people entertained and have them understand really the hierarchy and how people interact. And I think that was really just an effort to, it's funny, maybe other people interpret things differently, but I think that was really just a lot of it was devised or constructed to just create drama, to keep interest. And I think that it does that sufficiently.
I couldn't agree more. And it's going to be on demand everywhere as of the 31st of August.
That's right.
Which is huge because it's got, a lot of eyeballs are going to come to this. So I really, really encourage people to check out Baby Money. Incredible cast. Everyone really toes the line here and does their part. And, if you're looking for something that has a great thrill ride, great twists, great character development, great performances, Baby Money is definitely where it's at. I could not recommend it enough.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you for having me here. And I really appreciate the kind words and everything. And yes, everybody go support it. Go support the movie, watch it. I think it's going to be really literally everywhere. If you have an internet connection in North America, you can access this movie. So go support it on August 31st.